The house had a locked room, but the footsteps started outside it. I took the job because it sounded easy, and at that point, I really needed easy. I was 19, home from college for the winter, and trying to earn a bit of money without going back to waitressing over Christmas. My mom knew someone in Helmsley who knew someone else, and that's how I ended up agreeing to spend the night at a house called Blackthorn, looking after a 10-year-old boy while his family dealt with some emergency in Leeds. It was meant to be one night, maybe two at most, good pay, hot meals left in the fridge, and not much to do except make sure he went to bed on time and didn't sit up eating biscuits in front of the telly. Honestly, when I first agreed to it, I thought it sounded ideal. The weather should have put me off. Even before I left, the sky had that horrible winter look to it, low and swollen, and the color of old dishwater, like it had already decided what sort of night it was going to be. It had been raining on and off all afternoon, but by the time I got the bus as far as the village and had to finish the rest by taxi, it had turned into that filthy half-snow, half-sleet stuff that sticks to the roads and makes everything look dead. The driver actually asked me twice if I was sure I had the right address. When I told him Blackthorn House, he looked at me in the mirror in that very British way people do when they don't want to say something directly, then just went, "Right," and turned the heating up. Brackenfold wasn't really a village, not properly. It was more like a handful of old stone houses scattered too far apart to feel like neighbors, all of them sitting under the moor as if they'd been dropped there and forgotten. By the time we turned off the proper road and onto a narrow lane with standing water on either side, I'd lost phone signal completely. No bars, no messages coming through, nothing. I remember checking twice because it gave me a strange feeling straight away. You don't realize how much comfort there is in seeing your phone still connected to the rest of the world until it suddenly isn't. Blackthorn House stood on its own at the end of the lane behind a rusted gate and a wall too old to be decorative. It wasn't the sort of place that looked haunted in an obvious way. It wasn't falling down, and it wasn't covered in ivy the way houses in horror films always are. It was worse than that really because it looked lived in, lamps glowing behind heavy curtains, smoke coming from one of the chimney pots, a tidy gravel sweep at the front. But even from the taxi, I had this odd feeling that the house was watching me arrive. I know how stupid that sounds now, and at the time I actually laughed at myself for thinking it. But there was something about the windows. They were tall and narrow and set a bit too deep into the stone, so from a distance they looked less like windows and more like dark gaps in a face. The driver pulled up by the front step, but kept the engine running. He asked if I wanted him to wait until I got inside. I told him no, that I'd be fine. I said it automatically, the way you do, because I didn't want to seem childish. But when I got out and the cold hit me, properly hit me, like wet hands over the back of my neck, I nearly changed my mind. The wind carried this smell off the fields, damp earth and freezing water, and something older underneath it, something stale, almost like soaked wood left shut up too long. I grabbed my bag, thanked him, and by the time I'd turned back after closing the car door, he was already reversing away. That bit bothered me later. At the time, I barely noticed. I was more focused on the front door opening before I even knocked, and a woman standing there as if she'd been waiting just behind it. Margaret Harwood was smaller than I expected, maybe in her late 60s, wrapped in a dark green cardigan with one hand still on the latch. Her hair was pinned up but coming loose at the sides, and she had the sort of face that looked kind until you noticed how tense it was. She smiled when she saw me, but it wasn't the smile of somebody relaxed enough to be having a normal evening. It was one of those tight little smiles people give when they're already thinking about 3 things at once. "Niam, thank God," she said before I'd even introduced myself. "You made good time." I remember thinking that was a funny thing to say because I hadn't made good time at all. I was 10 minutes late, but she ushered me inside so quickly I didn't get a chance to say it. The warmth hit me first, then the smell of coal smoke and furniture polish, and then the quiet. Not silence exactly, because I could hear a fire crackling somewhere deeper in the house and the faint ticking of a clock, but the sort of quiet that seems to press against you. heavy, watching, like the whole place was listening for what came next. She took my coat before I'd fully got it off and hung it on a stand by the door. Then she bolted the door behind me. Not just locked it, bolted it, top and bottom. It was such a deliberate movement that I noticed it straight away. She saw me notice too, but instead of explaining, she just said, "The wind catches it otherwise." That might have made sense if there'd been one bolt. There were three. I followed her through into the kitchen, trying not to stare too much. The house was old in that expensive, inherited sort of way. Not cozy old, proper old. Flagstone floors, dark beams, paintings in heavy frames, long rugs that dulled your footsteps. The sort of house where every room feels like it has rules you haven't been told yet. There was a black range lit in the kitchen and a little lamp on the table, and sitting there with a mug of hot chocolate between both hands was Ollie. He looked up when I came in, gave me a quick nod, then looked back down into the mug. He wasn't rude, just quiet. Slim little thing, pale, dark hair badly cut, as if someone in the family had tried doing it themselves. I smiled and said hello. He said hello back, barely above a murmur. "Sorry he's shy," Margaret said. "He warms up." "I don't mind shy," I said, and I meant it. Shy children are usually easier than loud ones. Ollie looked at me then, just for a second, and there was something odd in his expression. Not fear exactly, more like appraisal. As though he was trying to decide whether I was the sort of person who would understand something if he said it out loud. Then he went back to staring into his drink. Margaret began explaining things quickly. Dinner was already made. He could stay up till 7:30 because of the disruption. There were candles in the drawer by the sink if the power went. Her daughter would ring when she reached Leeds. The mobile signal came and went, but the landline in the hall still worked, mostly. She said all of that in a rush while checking cupboards, glancing at the clock, and drying her hands on a tea towel that wasn't actually wet. Every now and then she'd stop mid-sentence and listen. I honestly thought at first it was just worry over whatever family issue had pulled them away. But the longer I stood there, the more I started to feel it too. That sense that she wasn't listening for weather or for a car on the drive. She was listening for something from inside the house. Then she said something that changed the whole feel of the evening for me. "There's one thing I need you to remember," she said, and for the first time she stopped moving altogether. "If you hear anything from the west corridor after 9, you ignore it." I laughed a little, not because it was funny, but because I thought she was joking in that dry old person way. "Sorry?" She didn't laugh back. "The west corridor," she repeated. "Upstairs. Last door on the left is kept locked. It stays locked. There is absolutely no reason for you to go down there tonight." There was a pause after she said it, and I became very aware of Ollie not looking up from his mug. I said, "Right," because what else was I meant to say? Margaret must have realized how strange it sounded, because she softened her voice a little and added, "It's an old house. Pipes knock. Doors swell in bad weather. If you're not used to places like this, noises can sound worse than they are." "Okay," I said again, "but don't open that door." I wish I could say I challenged her or asked the obvious question, but I didn't. People get embarrassed about odd family things, and I didn't want to seem nosy 5 minutes after arriving. I told myself there was probably some practical explanation. Valuable things stored in there, broken floorboards, a room in the middle of being repaired, something like that. But then Ollie spoke without lifting his head and said quietly, "It's louder when it snows." Margaret turned to him so sharply it made me jump. Enough. The word wasn't shouted, but it landed like a slap. Ollie flinched and went silent. She stood there a moment with that same tight expression, then forced another smile and started talking about bedtime routines as if nothing had happened. But then everything seemed fine on the surface, almost too fine, and that was somehow worse. I could feel myself trying to match her normal tone while my stomach tightened. A few minutes later, a car horn sounded outside. Margaret checked the clock, swore under her breath, and said her son-in-law had arrived earlier than expected. She crouched beside Ollie and fixed his collar with both hands. "Be good for Niamh," he nodded. "You stay downstairs this evening unless she comes with you." Another nod. "If the lights go, keep the kitchen fire-fed." This time she wasn't speaking to him. She was looking at me. I said, "I've got it, honestly." And she smiled again, but her eyes were still restless. "Of course you do." And she took me into the hall to show me the landline. As we passed the staircase, I looked up without meaning to. The upper landing disappeared into shadow where the bulbs didn't quite reach, and I could just make out a narrower hallway branching off to the left. That would have been the west corridor, I suppose. Nothing dramatic about it. Just old wallpaper, dark wood, and a strip of carpet. But there was a draught coming from up there, cold enough that I felt it from the bottom step. Margaret noticed where I was looking. "Best keep him in the kitchen or sitting room," she said. "The rest of the place can feel a bit bleak after dark." Bleak. That was the word she chose. Not dangerous, not creepy, just bleak. Somehow that made it worse. At the front door, she put on her gloves, then hesitated before unbolting it. "One more thing," she said, very quietly now. "If anyone comes to the house, do not let them in unless it's me or Daniel, no matter what they say." That one I did react to. "Anyone?" "It's a rural lane," she said quickly. "People knock for odd reasons. Cars slide, walkers get turned around. Best to be sensible." I nodded, but she was already undoing the final bolt. The wind shoved at the door the second it opened. Rain snow hissed across the step. Somewhere beyond the yard, I could hear a loose bit of metal clanging in the dark. She stepped outside, then leaned back in, as if she'd almost forgotten something. "And keep the back door bolted as well." Okay. This time she didn't move away straight off. She just stood there, peering over my shoulder into the hall behind me, into the quiet of the house, with a look on her face I didn't understand then, but do now. It was the look of somebody leaving someone else behind in a place they already know too much about. Then she said, "If he asks whether you can hear it, tell him no." I stared at her. Sorry, who? But she had already stepped back into the weather. Daniel was calling from the car. She pulled the door shut before I could say anything else, and I was left standing there with my hand still on the bolt, listening to the engine start and the tires crunch away over the wet gravel. I slid all 3 bolts into place, slower this time. When I turned around, Ollie was standing halfway down the hall, watching me. "She always says too much when she's nervous," he said. I gave a little laugh, though it came out thin. "Does she?" He nodded once. "It's worse when someone new stays over." There are moments you only understand properly afterwards, and that was one of them. At the time, I smiled and told him we'd be absolutely fine. I said it in that cheerful voice you use with children when you don't want them picking up on your nerves. Then I asked whether he fancied biscuits before bed, and he said yes. And for the next 20 minutes, I managed to convince myself I'd built the whole thing up in my own head. We sat by the kitchen fire with a plate of bourbons between us while sleet ticked against the windows. The house felt warmer, more ordinary. Ollie even started talking a bit, mostly about school and a boy he hated called Fraser, who stole pencils from everyone and denied it even when caught. I remember feeling relieved by how normal that was. I honestly thought for a little while that Margaret had simply frightened me with her odd manner, and that once she was gone, the place would settle. But there was one thing I noticed that stopped me fully relaxing. Every so often, while Ollie was speaking, he would glance past me toward the doorway that led into the hall. Not every minute, not in a panicked way, just often enough that I started checking too without meaning to. The hall beyond was empty each time. Dim, still, nothing there but the umbrella stand and the dark foot of the stairs. Eventually I said lightly, "You keep looking like you're expecting someone." He lowered his biscuit and looked at me for a second longer than felt normal. "Don't you hear that?" I listened. At first, nothing. Just the range ticking and the weather scratching softly at the glass. Then, very faintly, from somewhere higher in the house, came a slow sound. Not a bang, not a creak, more like a measured step across old boards, followed by another, then silence. I told myself it was the house settling. Ollie kept looking at me, and because I suddenly didn't want him seeing that tiny burst of fear that had gone through me, I forced a shrug and said, "No, I don't hear anything." That was the first lie I told in Blackthorn House, and by the end of the night, it was the one I kept wishing I'd never said. I told myself it was just the house. That was the first thing I clung to. Old beams, cold weather, pipes expanding, floorboards shifting, every explanation I could think of that didn't involve anything I didn't understand. I even said it out loud, half to Ollie and half to myself. Probably just the wind getting into the roof, I said, reaching for another biscuit I didn't really want. Ollie didn't reply. He just kept watching me, like he was waiting to see how long I'd stick with that answer. The sound didn't come again straight away, which helped. It let me breathe a bit, let me settle back into something that almost felt normal. I asked him about school again, about his friends, whether he liked living out here. He answered, but in short bits, distracted. Every now and then his eyes would flick up, not to the hall this time, but to the ceiling above us. That's when I started noticing it too. Not just the sounds, but the pauses between them. It wasn't constant. That's what made it worse. If it had been a steady creaking or rattling, I could have ignored it. But this was different. It was like something moving, stopping, then moving again when it thought no one was paying attention. A slow shift of weight overhead, a faint scuff, then nothing for a long stretch, just enough time for you to start doubting whether you'd heard anything at all. I honestly thought I was imagining it at first, but then Ollie spoke again, very quietly. It always starts like that. I looked at him. Starts what? He didn't answer straight away. He just dipped his biscuit into his tea until it went soft and broke apart, then said, "The pacing." I felt something tighten in my chest, but I kept my voice level. "You mean the noise upstairs?" He nodded. "It's probably just the nursery's above this room." He cut in, not rudely, just matter of fact. "No one sleeps there." There wasn't anything I could say to that without sounding like I was brushing him off, so I didn't. I just gave a small nod and took a sip of my tea, even though it had gone cold. My eyes drifted up to the ceiling without me meaning them to. It looked perfectly normal. Plaster, faint cracks, a shadow in one corner where the light didn't quite reach. Another faint sound. This time, I heard it clearly. A single step, slow, deliberate. Then another a few seconds later, as if whatever was making the sound had shifted its weight and paused again. I felt it properly then. Not panic, not yet. Just that creeping awareness that something wasn't lining up with the explanation I'd been telling myself. Houses creak, yes, but they don't pace. I forced a smile. "All right," I said, trying to keep things light. "Even if there is something up there, it's probably just the wind knocking something loose. Old places like this, you get all sorts of odd noises." Ollie didn't argue. That almost made it worse. "Do you want to watch something?" I asked. "Before bed?" He nodded, but he didn't look excited, just relieved to have something else to focus on. We moved into the sitting room, which was warmer and a bit brighter. There was a television tucked into a cabinet, and once I figured out which remote actually worked, I put on something mindless, some game show I didn't even recognize. The kind of thing that fills the room with noise so you don't have to think too much. For a while, it helped. The light stayed on. The fire crackled. The presenter's voice bounced around the room, cheerful and loud, in a way that made everything feel less isolated. I could almost forget where I was. Almost. But then there were the gaps. Every time the volume dipped, or a contestant paused, or there was a moment of quiet between questions, I found myself listening again, waiting. And sure enough, it came back. A faint drag this time, like something being shifted across wood. Not heavy, not furniture, something lighter, followed by a soft, hollow knock like it had bumped into a wall. Ollie froze beside me. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. I hesitated just a second too long. "Yeah," I said finally. "I heard it." He pulled his knees up onto the sofa. "It's earlier than usual." "What is?" He glanced at the ceiling again, then back at me. "It doesn't normally move about until after 9. There was something about the way he said "move about" that made my skin prickle. I leaned forward and picked up the remote, turning the volume up a bit higher. "All right," I said more firmly now. "We're not going to sit here getting worked up over a bit of noise. We'll finish this. Then I'll take you upstairs, get you ready for bed, and that'll be that, yeah?" He didn't look convinced, but he nodded anyway. I tried to focus on the television, but my mind kept drifting back to what Margaret had said. If you hear anything from the west corridor after 9, you ignore it. She hadn't mentioned anything about before 9. She hadn't said anything about pacing, or dragging, or knocking. Another sound. This one sharper. Closer. Not directly above us anymore, but slightly off to the side, like it had moved across the ceiling space and was now somewhere above the hallway. I felt my pulse pick up. "Stay here," I said before I'd really decided to. Ollie grabbed my sleeve. "Don't go up there." "I'm not going up," I said quickly. "Just to the bottom of the stairs. I want to see if I can hear where it's coming from properly." He didn't let go straight away. "It stops when people go up." "What do you mean?" "It just stops," he said. Like it knows. I gave a small hack, reassuring smile, even though my stomach had dropped a bit. "It's a house, Ollie. It doesn't know anything." But even as I said it, I realized I wasn't entirely convinced. I gently pulled my sleeve free and stood up. The sitting room suddenly felt too warm, too close, like the air had thickened. As soon as I stepped into the hall, the temperature dropped. Not drastically, but enough to notice. The kind of cold that seeps through your clothes rather than hits you all at once. The staircase loomed up in front of me, darker than I remembered. The light from the kitchen didn't quite reach the top, leaving the upper landing swallowed in shadow. I stood at the bottom step and listened. For a few seconds, nothing. Then, very clearly, from above and slightly to the left, a soft shuffle. Not the creak of wood, not the groan of pipes. A shuffle, like bare feet on old floorboards. I felt my breath catch. My first instinct was to call out, to say something, anything, just to break the silence. But I stopped myself. I didn't want to make it worse for Ollie. I didn't want to sound frightened. So I stayed still, listening, waiting for it to happen again. It didn't. The house went completely quiet, too quiet. I realized then that I couldn't hear the television anymore. It had either gone to an advert break with no sound, or Ollie had muted it. Either way, the silence filled the space in a way that made every little noise feel magnified. I glanced back toward the sitting room. Ollie was still on the sofa, watching me, his face pale in the flickering light from the TV. I forced myself to turn back to the stairs. "Hello?" I called, keeping my voice steady. "Is someone up there?" The words sounded ridiculous the moment they left my mouth. Of course there wasn't anyone. Margaret would have said. The doors were locked. I'd seen her bolt them herself. No answer, just the faint, distant sound of the wind outside, pushing against the house. I let out a slow breath and took a step back from the stairs. "See?" I called over my shoulder, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Nothing." Ollie didn't respond. I walked back into the sitting room, sat down beside him, and handed him the remote. "Pick something else if you want," I said. He didn't take it. "Did it stop?" "Yeah," I said. "Told you it would." He nodded, but he still didn't look reassured. We sat there for a while longer, neither of us really watching the screen. I kept my ears tuned to the ceiling without meaning to, waiting for the sound to start again. Part of me hoped it would, just so I could prove to myself it was something explainable. The other part of me really didn't want to hear it at all. After a bit, I checked the time. 9:15. "Right," I said, clapping my hands softly. "Bedtime." Ollie hesitated. "Do I have to go upstairs now?" I smiled, keeping it gentle. "I'll come with you. We'll do it quickly, yeah? Teeth, pajamas, straight into bed. I'll stay until you're settled." He considered that, then nodded slowly. We stood up together. As we stepped back into the hall, I noticed something straight away. The air felt colder than before. Not just a bit colder, properly colder. Like someone had opened a window somewhere and forgotten to shut it. I glanced toward the staircase again. The darkness at the top looked thicker somehow. I told myself that was just the lighting. But as we started up the stairs, one step at a time, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had been moving up there earlier hadn't gone anywhere at all. I told myself not to stop. That was the main thing running through my head as we climbed the stairs. Just keep moving. Don't hesitate. Don't let Ollie feel you're unsure. The staircase creaked under our weight, but that was normal. Old wood always does that. I focused on that, on the familiar explanation, anything that kept the situation grounded. But the higher we got, the colder it became. It wasn't just a draft anymore. It felt uneven, like patches of cold hanging in the air. One step would be fine. The next would feel like you'd walked into something invisible and freezing. Ollie stayed close behind me, his hand gripping the back of my sleeve, not tight enough to hurt, but enough that I could feel how tense he was. At the top of the stairs, I paused for half a second. The landing stretched out in front of us, dimly lit by a single wall lamp that hummed faintly. The corridor to the right led to Ollie's room. That much I knew from earlier. But to the left, that was the west corridor. Even in the low light, you could tell it was different. The wallpaper was darker, older, peeling slightly near the edges where damp had crept in. The carpet looked thinner, more worn, like it hadn't been walked on in years. And at the far end, just barely visible in the shadow, was the door Margaret had mentioned, closed. I felt Ollie's grip tighten. "Don't look down there," he whispered. "I'm not," I said quickly, even though I had been. I turned us toward his room instead. "Come on, let's get you sorted." His bedroom was warmer, thankfully. Smaller, too. It felt more like a normal space. Posters on the wall, a cluttered desk, a pile of books by the bed. The kind of room that made the rest of the house feel even stranger by comparison, like this was the only part still properly lived in. "Teeth," I said, trying to keep my tone light. He nodded and disappeared into the little bathroom across the hall. I stood just outside, leaning against the wall, listening to the tap run, the quiet brushing sounds, anything that reassured me that everything was still ordinary. For a moment, it worked. Then the sound came back. Not from above this time, from down the corridor. I froze. It was faint, but unmistakable. A slow movement, a shift, then a soft, dragging noise across the floorboards. I turned my head slightly, trying to listen without making it obvious. The bathroom door was still open, Ollie humming quietly to himself as he brushed his teeth, completely unaware. Another sound, closer now. Not loud, not sudden, just nearer, like whatever it was had taken a step toward us. I straightened up, my heart starting to pound in a way I couldn't quite control. "Ignore it," I told myself. That's what she said, just ignore it. But it's a strange thing, being told not to do something like that. It doesn't make it easier. It makes it almost impossible. The humming in the bathroom stopped. "Ollie?" I said a little too quickly. "I'm done," he replied, spitting into the sink. "Good," I said. "Come on, let's get you into bed." He came out, wiping his mouth on his sleeve, and glanced instinctively down the corridor. Then he went completely still. I didn't need to ask why. I could hear it now, clearly. A slow, uneven pacing. Back and forth, from the direction of the locked door. It wasn't above us anymore. It was on the same floor. Ollie grabbed my hand. "It's not meant to be out there yet," he whispered. I swallowed hard. "It's fine," I said, though my voice sounded thin even to me. "It's just a house. Old pipes, floorboards." "It's not pipes," he said, shaking his head. "It stops when people go near it. You said that yourself." I hadn't realized I said that out loud earlier. Another step, this one louder, followed by something else, a faint, hollow knock, like something tapping lightly against wood. I felt a cold prickle spread up the back of my neck. "Bed," I said, firmer now. "Go on, get in." He didn't argue this time. He climbed into bed quickly, pulling the covers up to his chin. I moved around the room, turning on the lamp by his bedside, then checking the window. It was shut tight, the glass fogged slightly from the warmth inside. Outside, the storm had picked up again. Sleet rattled against the pane, the wind pushing in uneven gusts. For a second I focused on that, the weather, the normal explanation, something I could understand. Then I heard it again. Right outside the room, a shuffle, followed by a soft, dragging sound across the carpet. Ollie's eyes snapped to the door. "Don't open it," he whispered. "I'm not going to," I said. But I was already moving toward it. I don't know why. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was that part of me that needed to prove there was a reasonable explanation before things got any worse. I told myself it could be a loose bit of carpet, a window left open somewhere, anything. I reached the door and paused. The handle was cold under my hand. On the other side, the corridor was silent, too silent. I could feel Ollie watching me from the bed, holding his breath. "Stay there," I said softly. He nodded. I turned the handle, slowly, carefully, and opened the door just a crack. The corridor lay empty. The dim light from the landing stretched along the floor, catching the edges of the worn carpet. The west corridor sat in shadow to the left, exactly as it had before. The door at the end still closed, nothing moving, nothing there. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "See," I said, turning slightly back toward Ollie. "Nothing." But as I said it, something caught my eye. On the carpet just outside the room. A mark, dark, damp. I pushed the door open a little wider. There were more of them, faint but visible in the low light. Footprints, bare, leading from the direction of the west corridor, stopping just outside Ollie's door. I felt my stomach drop. They weren't there before. I was sure of it. I stared at them, trying to make sense of it, trying to force it into something logical. Water from a leak, mud tracked in earlier, anything. But they were too clear, too deliberate, each one spaced just slightly unevenly, like someone walking slowly. Watching, I heard Ollie shift behind me. "What is it?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because as I stood there, staring at those prints, something else happened. From the far end of the corridor, a soft creak, the kind a door makes when pressure shifts against it. I looked up. The locked door at the end of the west corridor was no longer fully closed. It had moved, just enough to leave a thin, dark gap between the frame and the wood. And for a moment, just a moment, I had the horrible, unmistakable feeling that something on the other side was looking straight back at me. I shut the door, not slowly, not carefully, just pushed it closed and turned the handle back into place like that would somehow fix what I'd just seen. My hand stayed on it for a second longer than it needed to, like I was expecting something to push back from the other side. Nothing did, but that didn't make me feel better. "Ollie," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady, "you're gonna stay in bed, all right? Don't get up unless I tell you." He nodded straight away, too quickly, like he'd been expecting that. "What did you see?" he asked. "Nothing," I said almost automatically. It came out too fast, too flat. He didn't argue, but I could tell he didn't believe me. His eyes flicked toward the door, then back to me, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked properly frightened. "It's closer than usual," he whispered. I ignored that. I had to. Instead, I stepped back from the door and moved toward the window again, more to give myself something to do than anything else. My thoughts were starting to spiral, trying to make sense of what I'd seen, footprints that hadn't been there minutes before, leading from a corridor I'd been explicitly told not to go near, and a door that had definitely been shut, now slightly open. There had to be an explanation. There had to be. Water, condensation, old wood shifting in the cold, someone in the house I hadn't been told about. That last one stuck a bit more than the others. "Does anyone else live here?" I asked, keeping my voice as casual as I could. Ollie shook his head under the covers. "No, no one at all? No one who might have come back?" "No," he said again, more firmly this time. "It's just us, and Nan, and Mum when she's here." "And your dad?" He hesitated. "He doesn't stay here." That wasn't helpful. I turned back to the door. The handle was still, the wood solid, no sound coming from the other side now. If I hadn't seen the footprints, if I hadn't seen that door move at the end of the corridor, I might have convinced myself it had all been in my head. But it hadn't. "What happens if you go down there?" I asked before I could stop myself. Ollie didn't answer straight away. "You're not meant to," he said eventually. "I know that," I said. "But what happens?" He shifted under the covers, pulling them tighter around himself. "Nan says it's just old parts of the house, that the floor's not safe. That's why it's locked." "But you don't believe that," I said quite quietly. He shook his head. "What do you think it is?" His eyes flicked to the door again, then back to me. "I think," he started, then stopped. "Go on." "I think it's not supposed to come out that far." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Come out?" He nodded. "From where?" He didn't answer that. Instead, he said, "The noises are usually quieter. They stay at the end, near the door." "And tonight?" I asked. He swallowed. "Tonight it came closer." That matched what I'd heard, what I'd seen. I turned away from him again, running a hand through my hair, trying to steady myself. This wasn't helping. Letting him talk like that wasn't helping. It was feeding into the fear, making it feel more real than it should. "Right," I said, a bit more firmly. "We're not going to sit here imagining things. I'm going to check the rest of the house, just to make sure everything's all right." "No," he said immediately. "I'll be quick." "No," he repeated, louder this time. "Don't go downstairs." "I'm not leaving you," I said. "I'll just check the doors, the windows." "That's when it moves more," he cut in, his voice shaking now. "When people walk around." I paused. That didn't make sense. Or maybe it did, in a way I didn't want to think about. "It's fine," I said, softer now. "I'll stay close, I promise." He looked like he wanted to argue, but instead he just nodded slowly and sank back into the bed, pulling the covers up again. "Leave the door open," he said. I hesitated, then nodded. "All right." I stepped out into the corridor again, this time more cautiously. The footprints were still there. That was the first thing I checked. Faint, damp marks against the worn carpet leading right up to the threshold of Ollie's room. They hadn't faded, hadn't changed, just stayed. I crouched slightly, looking closer. They were too clear to be accidental. You could see the shape of the toes, the arch, even the slight smear at the edge where whoever or whatever had shifted their weight. They looked fresh. That was the worst part. I stood up slowly, my eyes drifting back down the corridor. The west side was still in shadow, the door at the end still slightly open, that thin black gap staring back at me. I didn't move toward it. I told myself I wouldn't. Instead, I turned the other way, toward the landing and the stairs. If there was something wrong, something physical, something real, I needed to check the exits. That was sensible. That was what I was supposed to do. But as I walked, I became aware of something else. The house felt different. It wasn't just the cold anymore. It was the silence. Not empty silence. Listening silence. The kind that feels like it's waiting for you to do something. I reached the top of the stairs and paused again, glancing down into the hall below. The light was still on. Everything looked exactly as it had before. The umbrella stand, the coat rack, the front door with all 3 bolts still in place. Normal. I took a step down. The stair creaked loudly under my foot, and from somewhere behind me, a soft, quick sound, not from the landing. Closer, right behind me, I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. Slowly, very slowly, I turned my head. The corridor was empty. Ollie's door still open behind me, light spilling out into the hall. But the footprints, they weren't just outside his door anymore. There was another one. Further back, closer to where I was standing, I felt the breath catching my throat and appeared, right in front of my eyes. A dark, damp shape pressing into the carpet as if an invisible foot had just stepped down. I stumbled back, grabbing the banister to steady myself. "No," I whispered, more to myself than anything else. Another step, closer again. There was no sound this time, no shuffle, no creak, just the marks appearing one after the other, moving slowly toward me. I didn't think. I turned and ran back to Ollie's room, slamming the door shut behind me and locking it before I even realized what I was doing. Ollie jolted upright in bed. "What happened?" I pressed my back against the door, my chest rising and falling too fast to speak. "Did you see it?" he asked. I shook my head. But that wasn't true. I hadn't seen it, but I'd seen enough. "It's coming closer, isn't it?" he whispered. I looked at him, really looked this time. And for the first time since I'd arrived at Blackthorn House, I stopped trying to explain it away. Because whatever was out there wasn't just a noise, and it wasn't staying in that corridor anymore. I didn't move from the door for a long time. I kept my back pressed against it, one hand still gripping the handle like it might turn on its own if I let go. My heart was pounding so hard it made everything else feel distant, like I was hearing the room from underwater. Ollie was staring at me, waiting for me to say something, anything, but I couldn't get the words out straight away. Because I knew, properly knew now, that whatever I'd just seen wasn't something I could explain. It hadn't been there before, and then it had, right in front of me. "Tell me," Ollie said, his voice small but steady. "Please." I swallowed, forcing myself to look away from the door and back at him. "There were footprints," I said finally. "More of them." He didn't look surprised. "Did they move?" he asked. I hesitated, then nodded. His eyes dropped to the blanket in his lap. "Yeah," he whispered, almost to himself. "That's what it does." I pushed myself away from the door, though I didn't go far. I stayed close enough that I could reach it again instantly if I needed to. "Ollie," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "has this happened before? The footprints?" He shook his head. "Not like that." "What you mean?" "They're usually already there," he said. "Like when I wake up sometimes, or in the morning. They don't appear." That didn't make it better. If anything, it made it worse. I ran a hand over my face, trying to think. This had gone past creaks and drafts and loose floorboards. There was something physically happening in the house that I couldn't see, something that could move, something that had been right outside his room. And now I'd shut the door, trapped us in, or maybe trapped it out. I didn't know which was worse. "All right," I said, more to organize my own thoughts than anything else. We're going to stay in here for now. Doors shut, windows shut. We don't open anything unless we have to. Ollie nodded straight away. He'd already pulled the covers up again, sitting upright with his back against the headboard like he didn't trust himself to lie down. Does it ever come into your room? I asked. No, he said quickly. Then, after a second, I don't think so. That pause stuck with me. What do you mean you don't think so? He shrugged slightly. It stops at the door. Mostly. Mostly. I closed my eyes for a second. Has anyone else seen it? I asked. He didn't answer. Ollie, he looked up at me. Nan says it's just the house, he said. She says if you talk about it, it makes it worse. Worse how? He shook his head. She doesn't say. That sounded familiar. Too familiar. Margaret's face flashed in my mind, how tense she'd been, how quickly she'd shut things down, how specific her warning had been about the West Corridor. If you hear anything after 9, you ignore it. But it wasn't after 9 when it started, and it wasn't just noise. Why did she tell me not to open that door? I asked quietly. Ollie's gaze drifted past me toward the wall opposite the bed. She told my cousin the same thing, he said. Last year. What happened? He hesitated again. Ollie. She opened it, he said, barely above a whisper. I felt a chill run straight through me. And? She said it was just a room, he continued. Empty, just old furniture and stuff. But after that, she wouldn't stay over anymore. Did she say why? He shook his head. She just said it felt wrong, like someone had just left, even though no one was there. I glanced toward the door again. The silence on the other side hadn't changed. No footsteps, no dragging, nothing. But it didn't feel like the absence of something anymore. It felt like a pause, like it was waiting. What time is it? I asked. Ollie looked at the clock on his bedside table. 9, he said. Right on. Something about that made my stomach turn. The timing, the way it had started before, but now it felt like we'd crossed into something else. I walked over to the window again, more out of instinct than anything else. The glass was cold under my hand, the storm outside worse than before. The sleet had thickened, rattling harder against the pane, the wind pushing in uneven bursts that made the frame creak slightly. For a second, I just stood there, staring out into the dark. Then something moved. I blinked, leaning a little closer. At first, I thought it was just the trees, thin branches shifting in the wind at the edge of the garden. But then I saw it again. A shape, low, moving along the side of the house. I felt my breath catch. Don't, Ollie said behind me, his voice suddenly sharp. Stay there, I said, not taking my eyes off the window. The shape moved again, closer this time, just at the edge of what I could see. It wasn't clear enough to make out properly, but it was definitely there. Not a tree, not the wind, someone, or something, outside. I reached out and wiped a small patch of condensation from the glass, trying to get a better look. For a second there was nothing. Then, a face, right at the edge of the window, so close it must have been just outside the glass. I jumped back with a sharp breath, my heart slamming against my ribs. It was gone immediately, like it had never been there. Ollie, I said, my voice shaking now despite myself. Has anyone been outside before, walking around the house at night? He didn't answer straight away. Ollie, sometimes, he admitted. I turned to look at him fully. What do you mean sometimes? He looked pale now, properly pale. I hear it, he said, on the gravel and by the windows. Did you tell your Nan? He nodded. And? She said it's just people passing through, walkers, or someone checking the land. In the middle of the night? I asked. He didn't reply. I looked back at the window. The glass reflected the room now, me standing there, Ollie behind me in bed, the lamp casting a soft yellow glow over everything. Nothing outside, nothing visible, but I knew what I'd seen. That hadn't been a trick of the light. What I didn't expect was, I started more to myself than anything else, then stopped, because something else had just changed. Behind me, a sound. Soft, right at the door. Not footsteps this time, not pacing. A faint, slow pressure against the wood, like something leaning on it. I turned slowly. Ollie had gone completely still. Is it? He whispered. Didn't answer. I couldn't, because the handle I'd locked myself moved just slightly. A slow, testing turn, then stopped. The room felt suddenly too small, too quiet, too full of something I couldn't see. And in that moment, with something outside the house, something in the corridor, and us trapped in between, I realized the worst part of it all wasn't just that we weren't alone. It was that whatever was out there knew exactly where we were. I didn't breathe. Not properly. Not for a few seconds at least. I just stood there, staring at the handle, waiting for it to move again. Waiting for it to twist further, to force itself open, to properly prove, that this wasn't something I could talk myself out of. But it didn't. The handle stayed still. The pressure against the door remained, though. I could feel it through the wood, faint but constant. Like someone or something was resting their weight against it. Not trying to get in, just there. Ollie's voice came out in a whisper. It knows we're here. Don't say that, I said quickly, though my voice was barely any louder than his. It does, he insisted. It always does. I stepped away from the window and moved closer to the bed, putting myself between him and the door without really thinking about it. My mind was racing now, trying to piece everything together. The footprints, the pacing, the door at the end of the corridor, the face at the window. None of it lined up into anything logical. It felt like two different things happening at once. One inside, one outside. And neither of them made sense on their own, let alone together. Just like that. No flicker this time, no warning. 1 second the room was lit, the next it dropped into complete darkness. Ollie gasped. No. It's all right, I said immediately, though I couldn't see him anymore. I reached out blindly until my hand found the edge of the bed. It's just the power. Your Nan said it might go. But even as I said it, I realized something. The pressure on the door hadn't moved. If anything, it felt heavier. Like whatever was on the other side had leaned in a little more the moment the lights went out. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking more than I wanted them to. The screen lit up the room faintly, casting that cold bluish glow over everything. Ollie's face appeared in the dim light, eyes wide, fixed on me. Stay here, I said, trying to sound in control. There are candles downstairs. I'll go get. No, he said instantly. Don't open the door. I won't go far, I said. Just down the stairs and back. It's outside, he whispered. And inside. You said that. That stopped me, because he was right. There was something outside the house. I'd seen it, and something right on the other side of that door. For the first time, I realized how trapped we actually were. I swallowed. All right, I said slowly. Then we stay here, for now. Another sound. Not from the door this time. From the ceiling. A slow, dragging movement directly above us. Ollie flinched. It's back upstairs. I tilted my head slightly, listening. It was clearer now without the hum of electricity. A soft scrape. Then a pause. Then another, slightly heavier, like something shifting its weight carefully across the floorboards above. But that didn't make sense. We were on the top floor. There wasn't meant to be anything above us. Is there an attic? I asked quietly. Ollie nodded. But it's locked. Nan keeps the key. The dragging sound continued. Slow, measured, almost cautious. Then came something else. A faint tapping. Not random, rhythmic. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps again. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. That's new, Ollie whispered. I didn't reply, because I was too busy listening. The tapping stopped. The dragging stopped. Everything went silent again. And then, the baby monitor crackled. We both turned at the same time. I'd almost forgotten it was there, sitting on the small table near Ollie's bed. I hadn't even noticed it earlier. It looked old, out of place with the rest of the room. A small square unit with a faded speaker grill and a loose wire trailing from the back. It wasn't plugged in. I was sure of that. But now it was alive with static. A low, hissing sound that cut through the silence like something breathing. Ollie shook his head slowly. It doesn't do that. I stepped closer to it, my phone light trembling slightly in my hand. It's probably just interference, I said, though the words felt empty even as I spoke them. The static shifted, not louder, just different, like something was trying to come through. I leaned in slightly, straining to hear over the hiss. And for a second, just a second, I thought I heard something underneath it. A sound, soft, almost like a voice. I froze. Ollie, I said quietly, not taking my eyes off the monitor. Did you hear? Yes, he whispered. The static sharpened, then dropped. And what came through after it was clearer. Not loud, not fully formed, but enough. A breath, followed by a faint, broken whisper. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew it wasn't coming from the room. It was coming from the monitor. Ollie pulled the covers tighter around himself. Turn it off. It's not even on, I said, But even as I said it, I reached out and grabbed the unit, turning it over in my hands. No power light, no connection, nothing that should have made it work. The whisper came again, closer this time, more urgent, like it was trying to push through something. I dropped the monitor onto the table. "All right," I said, my voice firmer now, though my hands were shaking. "That's enough." I turned back toward the door. The pressure was still there, waiting, and then a new sound. From the other side, not a step, not a knock, a slow, deliberate scrape, right along the wood, from top to bottom, like something dragging its fingers down the door. Ollie let out a small, choked sound. "It's trying to come in," he whispered. I shook my head, even though I didn't believe it myself. "It's just..." The handle moved again, this time harder. A sharp, sudden twist. The lock rattled. I stepped back instinctively, pulling Ollie with me away from the door. Another twist, more force. The wood creaked under the pressure. And then, it stopped, just like that. It stopped, the scraping, the handle, the pressure. Gone. The silence that followed felt worse than anything that had come before, because it didn't feel like relief. It felt like something had decided to try a different way. I didn't trust the silence, not after everything that had just happened, not after the handle, the scraping, the voice through something that shouldn't have even worked. The kind of silence that followed wasn't calm, it felt deliberate, like whatever had been at the door had stepped back, not gone, waiting, changing. "Is it gone?" Ollie whispered. I shook my head slowly. "No," I said. "I don't think it's gone." He swallowed, pulling the covers tighter around himself again. "It does that sometimes," he said. "It stops so you think it's over." That didn't help. I turned away from the door, pacing once across the small room before forcing myself to stop. Moving aimlessly wasn't going to fix anything. Panicking wasn't going to help Ollie. I needed to think properly. Two things. That's what I kept coming back to. Two things were happening, something inside the house and something outside. The face at the window hadn't been my imagination. I knew that. It had been too clear, too close. And Ollie had said he'd heard someone walking around before, on the gravel, by the walls near the windows, which meant there was a real person out there. And whatever was in the corridor, I pushed that thought away before it could fully form. "Right," I said, more firmly now. "We're not staying stuck in here without a plan." Ollie looked at me, uncertain. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we need to check the house properly," I said. "Make sure everything's secure. Doors, windows, everything. If there's someone outside, I need to know they can't get in." "And the other thing?" he asked quietly. I hesitated. "We'll deal with one thing at a time," I said. He didn't look convinced, but he nodded anyway. I took a slow breath, then stepped toward the door again. My hand hovered near the handle, but I didn't touch it straight away. I listened first. Nothing. No footsteps, no dragging, no breathing on the other side, just silence. I glanced back at Ollie. "Stay right behind me," I said. "Don't let go of my arm." He climbed out of bed reluctantly, moving quickly to my side. His hand gripped my sleeve again, tighter this time. I unlocked the door. The click sounded far too loud. For a second, I just stood there, waiting. Then I opened it, slowly. The corridor lay empty, the same dim light, the same worn carpet, the same shadowed stretch leading toward the west corridor. But the footprints, they were gone, completely. I stepped out carefully, my eyes scanning the floor where they'd been just minutes ago. Nothing. No damp marks, no traces, just dry, worn fabric like nothing had ever been there at all. "That's not possible," I muttered. Ollie leaned closer. "They disappear sometimes," he said. "Sometimes?" I repeated. He nodded, "Usually by morning." I didn't like the way he said usually. I straightened up, forcing myself to move forward. "Come on," I said. "Stay close." We made our way toward the landing again, step by careful step. The air still felt cold, but not as sharp as before. The kind of cold that settles into the house when the heating cuts out, not something that moves with you. At least that's what I told myself. When we reached the top of the stairs, I paused again, looking down into the hall below. Everything still looked normal. Too normal. The front door was still bolted, the coat rack untouched. No signs of anything being disturbed. "See?" I said quietly, more for Ollie's benefit than mine. "Everything's fine downstairs." But even as I said it, I knew that wasn't true, because I could hear something else now, not from above, not from the corridor, from outside. A faint crunching sound, slow, uneven, like footsteps moving across gravel. Ollie heard it too. His grip tightened. "It's back," he whispered. I moved down the stairs, keeping my eyes fixed on the front door. The sound grew clearer the lower we got. Crunch, pause, crunch, circling. The thought hit me before I could stop it. Circling the house. We reached the bottom step, and I stepped into the hall, my heart pounding again. The sound was definitely outside now, somewhere along the front of the house. Close enough that it felt like whoever or whatever was making it could be just on the other side of the door. "Stay here," I said, holding out an arm to stop Ollie from coming any further. "No," he said quickly. "Don't leave me." "I'm not leaving you," I said. "Just stay behind me." He nodded, pressing close. I moved toward the front door slowly, each step feeling heavier than it should have. The bolts were still in place, all three of them. I checked them anyway, one by one, just to be sure. Secure. The footsteps outside stopped. Right outside the door. I froze. Ollie's breath caught behind me. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, a soft scrape, not on the gravel, on the wood, right against the front door, like someone running their hand slowly across it. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "Who's there?" I called, my voice louder than I meant it to be. No answer. Just that same slow scraping sound. Then, 3 taps, light, measured, exactly like the tapping we'd heard upstairs. I stepped back instinctively. "That's not right," I said under my breath. Ollie shook his head quickly. "It doesn't knock." "Then what does?" I asked. He didn't answer. The tapping came again. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Exactly the same. I glanced toward the window beside the door. The curtain was drawn, but I could see the faint outline of movement behind it, just enough to know something was there. Watching. "Don't open it," Ollie whispered urgently. "I'm not going to," I said. But my hand had already moved closer to the bolts. Not to open them, just to check, to make sure they were still there, still holding. Because suddenly, the idea that something could be outside wasn't the worst part anymore. The worst part was the thought that whatever was knocking might already know how to get in. I stepped away from the door, not because I felt safer, just because standing that close to it suddenly felt like the worst place I could be. The tapping had stopped again, but it hadn't ended. It felt paused, like everything else that night. Measured, intentional. "Back," I said quietly, guiding Ollie away with me. "We're not staying right next to it." He nodded, not taking his eyes off the door as we moved into the sitting room. The television was still on, casting flickering light across the walls, but the sound had dropped low, almost muted. It felt wrong now, like something from earlier in the evening that didn't belong anymore. The house had changed. I could feel it. "What do we do?" Ollie asked. I didn't answer straight away because I was thinking about something else. The footprints outside, the movement by the window, the fact that someone or something had been close enough to the house to press against the glass. And then, the tapping, the same pattern as upstairs. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. That wasn't random, that was deliberate, a signal or a response. "Stay here," I said suddenly. Ollie's head snapped toward me. "No." "I'm not going far," I said quickly, "just to the back. I need to check something." "No," he said again, louder this time. "Don't go outside." "I'm not going outside," I said. "I just need to look." That wasn't entirely true, but I couldn't just sit there anymore. If there was someone out there, if there had been someone walking around the house watching the windows, then I needed to know where they were, or at least where they'd been. Because if it was a person, then that was something I could understand, something I could deal with. The other thing, I pushed that thought away again. "I'll keep the door in sight," I added, softer now. "I promise." Ollie hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Don't be long." "I won't." I moved through the kitchen, grabbing the small torch from the drawer Margaret had pointed out earlier. My hands felt steadier now, not because I was calmer, but because I had something to focus on. A task, something practical. The back door was at the far end of the kitchen, heavy wood with a small frosted window set into it. I checked the bolt first. Still locked, still secure. For a second I just stood there, listening. Nothing. No footsteps, no tapping, no movement at all. That silence again. I reached for the handle slowly, then stopped. Ollie's voice echoed in my head. "Don't go outside." But something else pushed back against that. The face at the window, the footsteps on the gravel, the certainty that someone had been close enough to see us. If they were still out there, I needed to know. I slid the bolt back. The metal scraped loudly in the quiet. I winced, glancing over my shoulder, half expecting something to react to the noise. Nothing did. I opened the door just enough to step outside. The cold hit me immediately, sharper than before. Wet, heavy. The sleet had thickened into something closer to snow now, sticking to the ground in uneven patches, turning the gravel into a dark, slushy mess. I stepped out onto the back step, pulling the door almost closed behind me, but not fully. I didn't want to be locked out, not even by accident. The torch beam cut through the darkness in a narrow line. At first, I didn't see anything. Just the yard, the low stone wall, the edge of the fields beyond, barely visible through the weather. Then I lowered the beam. Footprints, everywhere, fresh, pressed deep into the wet gravel and slush, circling the back of the house just like Ollie had described. They weren't neat or straight. They wandered, doubled back, crossed over themselves like whoever had made them hadn't been walking in a straight line at all. They'd been pacing, watching, waiting. My stomach turned. "Hello?" I called, louder this time. The wind swallowed the sound almost immediately. No answer. I stepped down from the back step, moving slowly across the yard, following the prints with the torch. They led away from the house, toward the far corner where a small outbuilding sat half in shadow. The coal shed. I hadn't noticed it properly when I arrived. Just a low, squat structure with a sagging roof and a door that looked like it barely held together. Now, with the torch beam fixed on it, I could see something else. The door wasn't shut properly. It hung slightly open, just enough to leave a dark gap between the wood and the frame. I felt that same cold prickle at the back of my neck. Someone had been there, recently. I glanced back at the house. All the windows were dark except for the faint glow from Ollie's room upstairs. I could just make out his shadow moving near the window, probably watching me. Just checking. I muttered under my breath, more for my own benefit than anything else. Then I moved toward the shed. Each step felt heavier than the last. The ground sucked slightly at my shoes, the wet gravel shifting underfoot. The closer I got, the more the smell hit me. Damp, rotting wood, and something else, something stale. The same smell I'd noticed earlier when I got out of the taxi, only stronger here. I reached the door and stopped. The gap looked darker up close, too dark. Like the light from my torch didn't quite reach all the way inside. For a second, I considered turning back, going inside, pretending I hadn't seen it. But then I thought about Ollie, about the footprints, about the face at the window. And I pushed the door open, slowly. The hinges creaked. The sound felt too loud in the quiet. The beam of the torch swept across the inside. At first, it looked like exactly what it was meant to be. Stacks of coal, old tools, broken bits of wood shoved into corners. But then the light shifted, and I saw it. A blanket, not thrown aside or forgotten, laid out, folded, used. Next to it, a small pile of tins, empty food cans, a plastic bottle half filled with water, a crumpled packet of biscuits. My chest tightened. Someone had been staying here, not passing through, not just walking around the house, living, close enough to watch every light turn on and off, close enough to walk right up to the windows. I took a step further inside, the beam of the torch shaking slightly now. There was more, scratches on the inside of the door, deep, repeated, as if someone had dragged something sharp across the wood again and again. And on the wall, I almost missed it at first, a piece of paper, pinned roughly with a bent nail. I stepped closer, raising the torch. It was a drawing, childlike, rough, but the house, Blackthorn, every window marked in dark pencil. And at the upstairs corner, one window circled heavily over and over again, Ollie's room. My throat went dry. I heard something then. Behind me, I turned sharply, the torch beam swinging wildly across the shed. Nothing, just the door, still open, the dark yard beyond. But I could feel it, that same sensation, being watched. Not from inside the shed, from somewhere else. I stepped back toward the door quickly, my pulse racing again. As I reached the threshold, I glanced once more at the drawing, and that's when I noticed something I hadn't before, a shape at the window in the drawing. Not detailed, just a shadow, a face, looking out. I backed out of the shed, my breath coming faster now. Something wasn't right, not just in the house, out here too. I turned toward Blackthorn and froze. Because in the upstairs window, Ollie's window, there was a silhouette standing behind the glass, perfectly still, watching. My heart dropped. "Ollie?" I whispered, even though he couldn't hear me. But something about it felt wrong, too still, too tall. And then, as the torch beam flickered slightly in my hand, the silhouette moved, not away from the window, but sideways, slowly, like it was slipping out of sight, like it had just realized I could see it too. I ran. I didn't think about it, didn't try to understand what I'd just seen. I just ran straight back toward the house, slipping slightly on the wet gravel, my heart hammering so hard it made everything feel blurred and unreal. That hadn't been Ollie. I knew that. The shape had been wrong, too tall, too still. And the way it moved, not stepping away, not turning, just sliding out of view. I reached the back door and grabbed the handle, pulling it open harder than I meant to. The warmth hit me again, but it didn't feel safe anymore. It felt wrong, like stepping into a place that had already changed while I wasn't there. Ollie! I called as I stepped inside, slamming the door shut behind me and shoving the bolt back into place. No answer. My stomach dropped. Ollie! I called again, louder this time, moving quickly through the kitchen and into the hall. The house was too quiet. No television, no movement, nothing. I took the stairs two at a time, my breath coming fast, my mind racing through every possibility I didn't want to face. He's fine. He's just quiet. He's still in his room. That's what I told myself. But when I reached the top of the stairs, his door was open, wide. The light still on inside, empty. No, I whispered, stepping forward slowly. Ollie? No reply. The bed was still rumpled from where he'd been sitting, the covers half pulled back. The lamp glowed softly on the bedside table. Everything looked exactly the same as when I'd left, except he was gone. My chest tightened painfully. I stepped into the room, turning in a slow circle, as if I'd somehow missed him. Ollie, this isn't funny, I said, though my voice was shaking now. Where are you? Nothing. Then, a sound, faint, from the corridor. I turned toward the door slowly. The hallway was darker now. The light that had been there earlier flickered once, then steadied. And at the far end, the west corridor door, this was fully open. Not just a crack anymore, wide. A black gap leading into darkness that seemed deeper than the rest of the house. I felt my stomach twist. Ollie? I called again, my voice barely more than a whisper now. No answer. But from somewhere beyond that open doorway, I heard something. A soft movement. Then a faint sound I recognized immediately. Footsteps. Not pacing this time, walking away from me, deeper into the corridor. No, I said under my breath. I stepped out of the room slowly, my eyes fixed on the open door at the end of the hall. This was wrong. Every instinct I had was telling me not to go near it. Margaret's voice echoed in my head. Don't open that door. But it was already open, and Ollie was gone. I couldn't just stand there. Ollie, I called, louder now. If you're down there, you need to answer me. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, everything went still again. Then a faint sound. Not quite a voice, but close. Like someone trying to speak through something. I took another step forward, then another, each one slower than the last. The air changed as I got closer, colder, damp. That same smell from the shed creeping into the corridor now. Rotting wood, stale air. Like something that had been sealed away for too long. I reached the edge of the west corridor and stopped. The darkness inside felt different, heavier. Like it wasn't just the absence of light. My phone torch flickered slightly as I raised it. The beam cut into the corridor, revealing old wallpaper peeling from the walls. Patches of damp spreading outward in uneven shapes. The carpet here was darker, worn thin, and something about it looked disturbed, like it had been walked on recently. A lot. Ollie, I said again, softer now. No reply. But the feeling that something was there just beyond the reach of the light grew stronger. I took one more step forward, and that's when I saw it. The floor, just inside the corridor. More footprints, not fading this time, not disappearing, clear, fresh, leading away from me, deeper into the darkness. My breath caught. I followed them with the light. They went all the way down the corridor, right up to the open doorway at the end. And then, they didn't stop. They went inside. I stood there, frozen, my mind screaming at me to turn back, to leave, to get out of the house entirely. But Ollie, I couldn't leave him. Not in there. Not with whatever this was. I stepped into the corridor. The temperature dropped instantly. Cold enough that I could see my breath in the faint light. The air felt thicker too, harder to move through, like it was pressing in on me from all sides. I followed the footprints slowly, my heart pounding louder with every step. The walls seemed closer here, the ceiling lower. The sound of the storm outside faded, replaced by something else. A faint, uneven breathing. Not mine, not close enough to place. But there, I reached the doorway at the end and stopped. The room beyond was almost completely dark. My torch barely reached the far wall, but what it did show was enough. Old furniture, covered in sheets, a broken cot pushed against one wall, a wardrobe standing slightly open, and on the floor, more footprints. Hundreds of them, layered over each other, crossing in every direction, like someone had been walking in circles, over and over and over again. My stomach turned. "Ollie?" I whispered. No answer, but then a sound from inside the wardrobe, a soft shift, like something moving in the dark. I raised the torch slightly, my hand shaking now. The wardrobe door moved, just a little, creaking open further on its own. And from inside, something stepped out, not fast, not sudden, slow, deliberate. A man, thin, gaunt, barefoot, his skin pale, almost gray in the dim light, his eyes fixed on me, unblinking. My breath caught in my throat. For a second, neither of us moved. Then, he tilted his head slightly, and in a voice that sounded like it hadn't been used properly in a long time, he whispered, "You're not meant to come in here." I couldn't move, not forward, not back, not even enough to properly breathe. My whole body just locked where I stood, the torch trembling in my hand as the light shook across his face. He didn't look like anything I'd expected. Not wild, not frantic, worse than that. He looked used to this, used to the room, used to the dark, used to someone eventually standing where I was now. His eyes didn't leave mine. "You're not meant to come in here," he repeated, quieter this time, like he was reminding me of something obvious. My throat felt dry. "Where's the boy?" I managed. For a moment, he didn't react. Then his head tilted slightly the other way, slow and deliberate, like he was trying to understand the question. "The boy," I said again, my voice stronger now despite the shaking in my chest. "Where is he?" A faint smile pulled at one side of his mouth. "Not friendly, not right. He's not supposed to wander," he said. Something in the way he said it made my stomach turn. "Where is he?" I snapped. The torchlight flickered again, catching the edges of the room, the layered footprints, the broken cot. For a second, I thought I saw movement in the corner, something shifting. But when I looked properly, there was nothing there. Just him, standing between me and the wardrobe. "I didn't take him," he said suddenly. The words came out quickly, sharper than before. "I didn't." My grip tightened on the torch. "Then where is he?" He glanced past me, not at the corridor, not at the door, past me, like he was listening for something else, something behind me. I felt it before I turned, that same cold, the kind that didn't belong to the room, the kind that moved. I stepped back instinctively, my heart slamming hard against my ribs as I half turned toward the corridor. The darkness there had shifted. It wasn't empty anymore. Something was in it, not clear, not fully formed, but enough to feel. The man's expression changed. Just slightly, the calm dropped, replaced by something else, not fear, recognition. "It followed you," he whispered. I turned fully this time, the torch beam cutting back down the corridor. Nothing, just the peeling walls, the worn carpet, the open stretch of darkness leading back toward the landing. But the feeling that something was standing just beyond the edge of the light didn't go away. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice tight. He didn't answer straight away. Instead, he took a slow step backward, further into the room, away from the doorway, away from the corridor. "You shouldn't have come in," he said again, more urgently now. "It doesn't like it when people come in." "It," I said. But even as I spoke, I already knew. The footprints, the pacing, the thing at the door, the tapping, the voice in the monitor. It wasn't him. It had never been him. Another sound, behind me, closer this time. A soft, dragging step, right in the corridor. I spun around, the torch beam sweeping wildly. Still nothing. But the sound had been real, closer than before. I backed into the room without thinking, putting the doorway between me and whatever was out there. The man didn't come closer. He stayed where he was, watching me with that same fixed stare. "It comes out more when the house goes dark," he said quietly. "It moves easier." My pulse spiked. "What is it?" He shook his head slowly. "Doesn't matter what it is." "That does matter," I said, my voice rising despite myself. "There's a child in this house." "There shouldn't be," he cut in sharply. The words hit harder than anything else he'd said. "What?" I said. "There shouldn't be anyone here," he continued, his voice low but urgent now. Not at night. Not when it's like this. Then why are you here? I demanded. He didn't answer. Not properly. He just looked at me, then at the doorway, then back again, like he was weighing something, deciding something. I stay out of its way, he said finally. That didn't sound like survival. That sounded like routine. Another sound from the corridor, this time unmistakable. A step, heavy, closer. I stepped further into the room, my back hitting the edge of one of the covered pieces of furniture. Where's Ollie? I asked again, more urgently now. The man's eyes flicked toward the wardrobe for a split second, then back to me. My stomach dropped. I moved toward it before I could stop myself. No, he said quickly, but I was already there. I grabbed the wardrobe door and pulled it open wider. The torchlight flooded the inside, empty, just darkness and old wood, nothing there. I turned back to him. He's not. A sound cut me off, not from the wardrobe, from behind me, right at the doorway. I froze. The air shifted again, colder, heavier, like something had just stepped into the space behind me. The man's face changed completely. The calm was gone. For the first time, there was something like fear there. It's here, he whispered. I didn't turn. I couldn't, because I already knew whatever had been pacing, whatever had been at the door, whatever had followed me down the corridor was no longer out there. It was in the room with us. I didn't turn around. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to, but something deeper, something colder, told me not to. Like turning would make it real in a way I wouldn't be able to undo. The air behind me felt occupied, not moving, not breathing, just there. Close enough that I could feel the difference in temperature between my back and the rest of the room, like standing too near an open freezer door. The man didn't take his eyes off whatever was behind me. Don't look at it, he said quietly. That made it worse, because now I knew there was something to look at. Where is he? I whispered, forcing the words out despite the tightness in my chest. Where's Ollie? His gaze flicked just for a second toward the wardrobe again. This time I understood. Not inside it, behind it. I moved before I could think properly, stepping sideways, keeping my eyes forward, refusing to turn toward the doorway. I reached the wardrobe again, my hand shaking as I grabbed the edge and pulled. It didn't move. Too heavy. Help me, I said sharply. The man hesitated. Now, I snapped. Another second. Then he stepped forward, quickly this time, grabbing the other side. Together we dragged it across the floor. The sound was awful, loud, scraping, too loud in a room that had felt like it was holding its breath. And behind it, a gap, narrow, black, a space carved into the wall. I raised the torch, the beam cutting into the darkness, and a passage. Tight, low, bare wooden boards and rough stone. The air inside it looked thicker somehow. The light swallowed too quickly to see the end. My heart jumped. Does it go through the house? I asked. The man nodded once. All of it. That explained too much. The pacing, the sounds in the ceiling, the movement where nothing should be. Someone, him, had been using it. But something else had been moving through it too. Ollie, I called into the gap. My voice echoed strangely, swallowed by the narrow space. For a second, nothing. Then, a faint sound, a breath, a small, shaky voice. I'm here. Relief hit me so hard, it almost made me dizzy. Ollie, stay where you are, I said quickly. I'm coming to you. No, the man said immediately. I looked at him. What? You can't go in there now, he said, his voice low and urgent. Not while it's out. Then how do I get him? I demanded. He shook his head. You wait. I'm not waiting, I snapped at. He's in there. Another sound cut me off. From behind me. Closer now. Inside the rough, dragging step. The man flinched. Too late, he whispered. I turned then. I couldn't not. The torch swung with me, the light shaking violently across the room. And for a second, I thought there was nothing there. Then I saw it. Not clearly. Not fully. But enough. A shape, darker than the darkness around it. Standing near the doorway. Too tall. Too still. The edges of it didn't look right. Like it wasn't fully solid. Like it didn't belong to the same space as everything else. My breath caught in my throat. What is that? I whispered. The man didn't answer. He just stared at it, frozen. It doesn't like the light, he said finally. Then why is it? Because you came in here. The shape moved, not walking, not stepping, just shifting. Closer. The temperature dropped sharply. I could see my breath now, even clearer than before. From the passage behind the wardrobe, Ollie's voice came again, more panicked this time. It's coming down here. I turned back toward the gap. No, stay where you are, I said. Don't move. I can hear it, he cried. My heart lurched. It uses the walls, the man said quickly. It doesn't need the floor. That didn't make sense. None of this made sense. But the sound, a faint scraping echoing from inside the passage, was real, moving toward him. I dropped to my knees without thinking and shining the torch into the gap. "Ollie, come toward me," I said. "Now, slowly." "I can't," he said, his voice shaking. "It's behind me." A sharp sound from the room snapped my attention back. The shape had moved again, closer now, close enough that the edge of the torchlight brushed against it and didn't quite land, like the light couldn't fully touch it. My stomach twisted. "We don't have time," I said, more to myself than anyone else. I reached into the passage, grabbing blindly until my hand caught fabric. Ollie's sleeve. "Got you," I said, pulling him toward me. He scrambled forward, half crawling, half stumbling, until he tumbled out of the gap and into me. I pulled him close instinctively, backing away from the wardrobe. The man had moved too, further back into the room, further from the doorway, like he was keeping distance from whatever stood there. "It's not meant to come in here," he said again, but this time his voice didn't sound certain. I tightened my grip on Ollie. "Where do we go?" I asked. He shook his head slowly. "There isn't anywhere." The shape moved again, closer, now fully inside the room, and for the first time, I realized something worse than everything that had come before. It wasn't just following us. It wasn't just reacting. It was choosing. And right now, it had chosen this room. "Stay behind me," I said, pulling Ollie back until he was pressed against the wall. I didn't take my eyes off it this time. I couldn't afford to. The shape stood halfway between us and the doorway now, taller than the frame, its outline flickering slightly like it didn't fully belong to the room. The torchlight kept catching on it in strange ways, sliding off, bending, dimming, like the beam didn't quite know where to land. Ollie buried his face into my arm. "I don't want to look at it," he whispered. "Don't," I said. "Just stay close." The man moved again, slowly circling along the edge of the room, keeping distance between himself and the thing. His movements were careful, practiced, like he'd done this before. "It won't stop now," he said under his breath. "Not while it's like this." "Then how do we get out?" I snapped. His eyes flicked toward the passage behind the wardrobe. "It moves faster in there," he said. That wasn't helpful. A sudden sound cut through the room, a sharp crack, like wood splitting under pressure. The wardrobe shifted slightly behind us. The gap widened, and from inside the passage, something moved. Not Ollie this time. Something else. A scraping. Fast. Too fast. I spun the torch toward the opening, just as a dark blur shot past the edge of the light and vanished deeper into the walls. Ollie gasped. "It went behind me." "I know," I said, my voice tight. The man shook his head. "Like it's not one place," he said quickly. "It doesn't stay in one place." That didn't make sense. It couldn't be in the room and the passage at the same time. But I looked back at the doorway. The shape was still there, unmoved, watching. My chest tightened. "Then what is that?" I asked, pointing the torch at it. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer to me, closer than he had before, his voice dropping low, urgent. "That's what it lets you see," he said. I felt a cold wave run through me. "What does that mean?" "It doesn't need to be there, he said. "It just decides where you look." That made everything worse, because it meant I glanced at the passage again. Nothing. Then back at the doorway. Still there, still watching. "You've been living here," I said suddenly. "Inside the walls." He flinched slightly, like he hadn't expected me to say it out loud. "I stay where it doesn't go," he said. "But it's here now," I said. He nodded once. "Yes." "Why?" I demanded. He hesitated. For the first time, he looked unsure. "Because you came," he said finally. "That doesn't explain anything." "It notices change," he said, his voice sharper now. "New people, new sounds, new routines. It doesn't like it." "That's not," I started, then stopped, because something else clicked into place. The babysitters, Ollie's cousin, the warnings, the noise starting earlier than usual. It wasn't random. It was reacting. Then why didn't it do this before? I asked. "Why now?" He looked at Ollie, then back at me. "Because you don't ignore it," he said. I stared at him. "What?" "You listen," he said. "You look, you follow it." My stomach dropped. "And that makes it worse?" He nodded. "It brings it closer." A sound from the passage interrupted us again, louder this time, closer. Something moving through the narrow space at speed. Ollie clutched my arm. "It's coming back." Stay behind me, I said again, though I didn't know if that would help. The scraping grew louder, closer, right at the edge of the opening. I raised the torch, bracing myself, and then it stopped, dead still. The silence hit harder than the noise had. I held my breath, waiting, nothing. Then a hand, pale, thin, slid slowly into the light from the passage, not reaching, not grabbing, just appearing. Fingers pressing lightly against the edge of the wall. Ollie let out a small, broken sound. "That's not me," the man said quickly, his voice shaking now. I knew that. I could see it. The hand was wrong, too long. The fingers slightly bent at angles they shouldn't be. And then it pulled back, gone, like it had never been there. The man stepped back further, his breathing uneven now. "It's learning," he said. "What do you mean?" I asked. "It doesn't usually do that," he said. "Not like that." A slow movement behind him drew my attention again. The shape, closer now, almost halfway into the room. The temperature dropped sharply again. My breath fogged in front of me. Ollie's grip tightened. "Make it stop," he whispered. I didn't know how. None of this had rules I understood. But one thing was clear. Standing here wasn't going to save us. "We're leaving," I said suddenly. The man looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "You can't," he said. "We are," I snapped. "There's a door downstairs. There's a road. There are people." "There's no one," he cut in. "Not tonight." "I don't care," I said. "We're not staying here." Another step from the shape, closer, almost within reach now. And for a split second, the torchlight caught something, a face. Not clear, not complete, but enough, hollow, empty. Looking straight at me, my stomach twisted violently. "Now," I said. I grabbed Ollie's hand and pulled him toward the door. The man hesitated, then followed. We moved as one, pushing past the edge of the shape, and for a second, I felt it. Cold, sharp, like walking through something that wasn't solid but still touched you. Ollie cried out. I didn't stop. We burst into the corridor, running without looking back. Because whatever that thing was, it wasn't just in the room anymore. It was following us out. We didn't stop running, not in the corridor, not on the stairs, not even when my foot slipped halfway down and I had to grab the banister to keep us both from falling. Ollie was clinging to my hand so tightly it hurt, but I didn't let go. I couldn't. Behind us, nothing. No footsteps, no dragging, no sound at all. But that didn't mean anything anymore. We hit the bottom of the stairs and I pulled him straight toward the front door. My hands moved automatically, fumbling at the bolts, trying to remember which one slid first. "Wait," the man's voice came from behind us, breathless. "I'm not waiting," I snapped. "You don't understand." "I understand enough," I said, yanking the top bolt free. "We're getting out of this house." The second bolt stuck. For a second, just a second, I thought it wouldn't move at all. My chest tightened. "Come on," I muttered under my breath, forcing it harder. It gave with a sharp metallic scrape. "One left. Don't open it," the man said again, closer now. "Not like this." "Then how?" I shot back. He didn't answer. That told me everything. I threw the final bolt back and pulled the door open. The wind hit us immediately, colder and stronger than before, sleet slashing across the doorway. The yard beyond was barely visible, the storm thick enough to swallow the edges of the world. "Go," I said, pushing Ollie forward. We stepped out into it. The cold was brutal. Not just uncomfortable, painful. It bit into my face, my hands soaked through my clothes almost instantly. The gravel shifted under our feet, slick and unstable. I turned back for a split second. The man was still in the doorway. He didn't follow, I shouted. He shook his head slowly. "It doesn't leave," he said. Then he pulled the door shut. The sound echoed through the storm. And just like that, we were alone. My stomach dropped. "Where do we go?" Ollie shouted over the wind. "The car," I said. "Garage, round the side." I grabbed his hand again and pulled him along the edge of the house, the sleet stinging my skin, the wind pushing against us hard enough to make every step feel like a fight. The yard looked different now, worse. The footprints were everywhere again, more than before, overlapping, circling, leading in every direction. Some of them were fresh enough that the edges hadn't filled with slush yet. And they weren't just around the house anymore. They led away, toward the drive, toward the lane, like something had been moving back and forth between the house and the road, watching both. "Keep moving," I said, though my voice felt thin against the storm. We rounded the side of the house and reached the garage. The door was half open, just enough to slip inside. I shoved it wider, pulling Ollie in after me, then pushed it back down as far as it would go. The wind dulled instantly. The silence that followed felt just as wrong as the one inside the house. The car sat in the center of the garage, exactly where Margaret had left it. An old Volvo, dusted lightly with grime, but solid, real, normal. I fumbled in my pocket, pulling out the key she'd handed me earlier. "Get in," I said, my hands shaking as I unlocked it. Ollie scrambled into the passenger seat. I slid into the driver's side, slamming the door shut behind me and locking it instinctively. For a second, we just sat there, breathing, listening, nothing, no footsteps outside, no movement, just the faint rattle of the storm against the metal roof. "Start it," Ollie said. I nodded, pushing the key into the ignition. It turned. The engine coughed, then died. My stomach dropped. "No," I muttered, trying again. The engine struggled, turned over once, twice, then stalled again. "Come on," I whispered, gripping the wheel tighter. A sound outside the car made me freeze. Not loud, not sudden, just a soft crunch on the gravel, right outside the garage. Ollie's head snapped toward the door. "Did you hear that?" "Yes," I said quietly. Another step, closer, slow, deliberate. The same uneven rhythm as before. My grip tightened on the key. "Start," I whispered, turning it again. The engine coughed harder this time, then caught. The low rumble filled the space. Relief hit me in a sharp wave. "Go," Ollie said. I shifted into reverse, my hands still shaking, and eased the car back. The tires slipped slightly on the wet ground, but held. The garage door scraped against the roof as we moved out, catching briefly before jerking free. And as we cleared the doorway, I saw it, standing just beyond the edge of the light. Not the shape from inside, not that thing. A man, the same one from the window, tall, still watching us, his face clearer now in the headlights, pale, wet, expressionless. For a second I thought it was Dennis, but it wasn't. This man's eyes, they didn't look right. Too fixed, too empty, like he'd been standing there a long time, waiting. "Drive," Ollie said, his voice shaking now. I didn't hesitate. I pressed the accelerator. The car lurched forward, tires spinning briefly before catching, then we were moving, past him, onto the drive, toward the lane. I didn't look back. I didn't want to. But as we reached the end of the drive, something made me glance in the mirror. The garage, the house, both visible for just a second through the storm. And in one of the upstairs windows, I saw it again. The shape, standing still, watching us leave. And for the first time that night, I realized something that made my chest go cold. We hadn't escaped it. We just left it behind. And something else had been waiting outside all along. The lane was worse than I remembered. What had looked manageable on the way in now felt like something else entirely. Flooded in places, thick with slush in others, the tires struggling to grip as I pushed the car forward. The headlights barely cut through the storm. Everything beyond a few meters looked swallowed, like the world ended just past the bonnet. "Keep going," Ollie said quietly. "I am," I said, though my hands were tight on the wheel. The road curved slightly to the left, then stopped, not properly, not cleanly, just blocked. A tree, huge, split near the base, its trunk lying across the narrow lane like it had been dropped there on purpose. Branches twisted across the road, heavy with wet snow and ice, too thick to drive through, too wide to go around. I hit the brakes, the car slid slightly before stopping. "No," I whispered. Ollie leaned forward, staring through the windscreen. "Can we move it?" I almost laughed. "No." The engine idled quietly. The storm pressed in around us, and for the first time since leaving the house, there was nowhere else to go. We sat there in silence for a moment. Then, headlights, faint, through the storm, behind us. My stomach tightened. "Someone's coming, Escalates." I turned slowly, looking through the rear window. A vehicle, half hidden by the sleet, parked at the edge of the drive we just come from. Not moving, not getting closer, just sitting there with its headlights on, watching. "Is that?" Ollie started. "I don't know," I said, but I had a feeling, a bad one. The headlights didn't flicker, didn't dim, didn't move. They just stayed fixed on us, waiting. "Why aren't they coming down the lane?" Ollie whispered. I didn't answer, because I was thinking about what the man in the house had said. It doesn't leave. But the thing at the window, the man by the garage, he had been outside. And now, so was this. A slow movement caught my eye. The driver's door of the vehicle behind us opened. A figure stepped out, tall, familiar shape, walking toward us, slowly, through the storm. Ollie shrank back into his seat. "That's him." My pulse spiked. The one from the window? He nodded quickly. The figure kept coming, not rushing, not shouting, just walking, deliberate, like he knew we couldn't go anywhere. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Lock the doors, I said. They already are. Check them. He did. All locked. Good. The figure got closer, close enough now that the headlights illuminated his face properly. And that's when I saw it. It wasn't Dennis, but there was something familiar about him. Not in the way you recognize someone, in the way you recognize a type of person. Same clothes, same posture, same calm, controlled expression, like someone who belonged out here. Roll the window down a bit, he called, his voice carrying through the storm. I didn't move. I'm not opening anything, I said. He stopped a few steps from the car. That's sensible, he said, almost approvingly. His voice was normal, too normal. Who are you? I asked. He didn't answer straight away. Instead, he glanced past me, back toward the house, barely visible through the storm, then back at me. You shouldn't have gone inside the west side, he said. My stomach dropped. How do you know about that? He gave a small shrug. Everyone around here does. That's not an answer. No, he agreed, but it's enough. Ollie shifted beside me. Don't talk to him, he whispered. The man heard him. Of course he did. His gaze flicked briefly to Ollie, then back to me. He's been hearing it longer than you, he said. Haven't you? Ollie didn't respond. Stay away from us, I said firmly. I'm not here for you, he replied. That made something cold settle in my chest. Then why are you here? He took another step closer. Close enough now that I could see the details of his face clearly. Tired, weathered, but calm. Too calm. Because of the house, he said. I shook my head. What about it? He exhaled slowly, like he'd had this conversation before. Blackthorn wasn't built all at once, he said. Old part, new part, then older again. People kept adding to it over the years. Rooms on rooms, corridors where they didn't belong. I don't care about the architecture, I said sharply. You should, he said, because that's where it started. The wind howled around us, rocking the car slightly. What started? I demanded. He looked past me again, toward the house. You think it's just one thing, he said. That's the mistake everyone makes. My grip tightened on the wheel. What do you mean? There was someone living in there, he said. Long before tonight. You've already seen that, haven't you? The cold shed, the passage, the man in the walls. I didn't answer. And then there's the other thing, he continued. The one that stays. The one that stays, I repeated. He nodded. It didn't come from outside, he said, and it doesn't leave. Not properly. A chill ran through me. Then what is it? I asked. He hesitated, just for a second, then said something they ignored for too long. That wasn't an answer. That doesn't make sense, I said. It does if you think about it, he replied. Strange noises, people noticing things like then deciding not to talk about it, not to deal with it, just closing doors, telling each other it's nothing. Margaret, her warnings, the way she shut things down, the way Ollie had been told not to talk about it. My stomach twisted. They knew, I said quietly. He gave a small nod. Of course they knew. Then why stay? I asked. Why keep living there? Because people don't leave houses like that, he said. Not easily. Not when there's history tied into them. Family, land, reputation. That word stuck. Reputation. They covered it up, I said. He didn't deny it. They contained it, he said instead. By locking a door, I snapped. That doesn't contain anything. It does if no one opens it, he said calmly. I thought back to what Ollie had said. His cousin, the door, the room that felt like someone had just left. They didn't stop it, I said. No, he agreed. They just made sure no one looked at it long enough to understand it. A heavy silence settled between us. The storm pressed in, and somewhere in the distance, a faint sound. From the direction of the house, a knock, 3 taps, pause, 3 taps again. The man's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. It's noticed you leaving, he said. I felt a cold wave run through me. Good, I said. We're not going back. You might not have a choice, he replied. I glanced at the tree blocking the road, then back at him. What do you want? I asked. He met my gaze steadily. To make sure you don't make it worse. How would I do that? I demanded. By going back in, he said. My heart dropped. No. If you leave it like this, he continued, ignoring me, it won't stay contained. Not tonight. That's not my problem, I said. His expression hardened slightly. It will be, he said quietly. Another knock echoed faintly through the storm. Closer now. from the house. I turned instinctively, looking back down the lane, and for a split second, through the sleet, I saw it, in the upstairs window, the shape again, still, watching, waiting, and somehow, even from that distance, I felt it. That same presence, that same awareness. It hadn't been left behind, it was still there. And whatever had been circling the house before, whatever had been watching from outside, wasn't separate from it, not entirely. I turned back to the man slowly. "What aren't you telling me?" I asked. He didn't answer straight away. Instead, he looked at Ollie, then back at me, and said, very quietly, "It doesn't just stay in the house." My chest tightened. "What does that mean?" "It follows attention," he said. A long pause. "Then, you brought it further than anyone has in years." The words hit hard, cold, final, and for the first time since this started, I realized something worse than being trapped in that house, something worse than being watched, something worse than not understanding what it was. It wasn't contained anymore, and it wasn't finished with us. I didn't go back. I don't care what he said. I don't care how calm he sounded, or how certain he was about what would happen if we left it like this. There was no part of me willing to turn that car around and walk back into Blackthorn House, not after what I'd seen, not after what had followed us through those corridors. "I'm not going back in there," I said, my voice flat. The man didn't argue. He just stood there in the sleet, watching me with that same steady expression, like he'd already expected that answer. "Then you don't understand it yet," he said. "I don't need to," I replied. "I just need to get him out of here." I glanced at Ollie. He was staring straight ahead, pale, silent, like he hadn't fully come back from whatever he'd just been through. "That's all that matters." The man nodded once, slowly. "Then you should go," he said. I blinked. "What?" "The road won't stay blocked forever," he said, stepping back slightly. "Storm's shifting. You'll get a window." That didn't make sense. But then, a sharp crack echoed through the trees. Loud. Close. I turned instinctively. The fallen tree. It shifted. Just slightly at first, then more. One of the heavier branches gave way under the weight of the snow, splitting off and dropping into the ditch beside the lane. Not enough to clear the road completely, but enough to squeeze through. My heart jumped. "That's your chance," the man said. I didn't hesitate. I threw the car into gear and pressed forward, easing the wheel carefully as I guided us toward the gap. The tires slipped once, then caught, crunching over broken wood and wet gravel as we forced our way past the trunk. For a second, I thought we wouldn't make it. Then, we were through. The lane opened up ahead, still narrow, still half flooded, but clear enough to drive. I didn't look back straight away. I just drove. Faster than I should have. Faster than was safe. But I didn't care. I needed distance, space, anything that wasn't that house. Ollie didn't say anything for a while. Neither did I. The storm slowly thinned as we moved further away, the sleet turning back to rain, the visibility improving just enough that the road ahead felt real again, normal again. Eventually, I realized I could breathe properly. My hands loosened on the wheel. My heart slowed. "We're out," I said quietly. Ollie nodded, still staring ahead. For a moment, I let myself believe it, that it was over, that we'd left it behind. But then, he spoke. "Do you still hear it?" he asked. I frowned slightly. "Hear what?" He turned his head toward me slowly. "The knocking." I felt something tighten in my chest. "I don't hear anything," I said, but even as I said it, I listened, really listened. The car engine, the rain, the tires against the road, and underneath it, faint. So faint I almost missed it. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps again. My grip on the wheel tightened. "No," I whispered, more to myself than anything else. "It followed us," Ollie said quietly. I shook my head immediately. "No, it can't. That man said it stays in the house." "He also said it follows attention," Ollie replied. That stopped me because I remembered every word, every warning. "You brought it further than anyone has in years." I swallowed hard. "It's just in your head," I said, forcing the words out. "After everything that's happened, 3 taps, clearer this time, not from outside, from inside the car." My heart dropped. I glanced at the dashboard. Nothing. The doors, locked. The windows, closed. The sound came again. 3 taps, three taps, right behind us. From the back seat. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Ollie didn't either. We both just sat there, staring forward, breathing shallow for something worse to happen. But nothing did. The tapping stopped. The silence that followed felt just like the silence in the house. Not empty, waiting. I drove the rest of the way without speaking, didn't stop, didn't look back, didn't check the mirror, because I knew that if I looked, I might see something sitting there, something that hadn't been in the car before. We made it to the nearest town just before midnight. Lights, people, normal noise. I pulled into the first place I saw, a petrol station still open, and stopped the car. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then I said, "Stay here." Ollie nodded. I got out slowly, my legs unsteady, my head still spinning. The cold air hit me again, but it felt different here, less heavy, less watched. I walked around the car, stopped, stared through the back window. Empty, just the seats, nothing there. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. But as I stepped back, I saw it, not inside the car, reflected, in the glass, standing behind me, tall, still, watching. I spun around, nothing. Just the empty forecourt, a couple of cars, a man inside paying for fuel. Normal, completely normal. I turned back to the car. The reflection was gone. Of course it was. I got back in slowly. Ollie looked at me. "Did you see it?" I hesitated, then shook my head. No. That was the second lie I told that night. We didn't go back to Blackthorn. His family met us at the station later, frantic, confused, asking questions I couldn't answer properly. I told them enough to make them understand we couldn't stay there. Not the whole truth, just enough. They didn't argue. Not really. I think deep down, they already knew. The house was sold a few months later, or at least that's what I heard. No one stays there long. That's what people say. Something always goes wrong. Strange noises, broken routines, people leaving in the middle of the night without explanation. I haven't been back. I won't go back. But sometimes, late at night, when everything's quiet, I still hear it. Faint, measured, 3 taps. Pause, 3 taps again. And every time, I think about what that man said, about how it doesn't just stay in one place, about how it follows attention, about how I looked, how I listened, how I went into that room when I should have walked away. And I can't help wondering if it's still there because of the house or because I brought it with me. If this story stirred something within you, be it a flicker of unease, curiosity, or deep reflection, please leave a comment and share your thoughts. What do you think is truly going on? Have you ever experienced a sense of uncanny familiarity like that before? If you have similar stories of your own, don't hesitate to share them. Who knows? Maybe we are all touching upon the same hidden frequency. And if you want to keep exploring these dramatic, mysterious, and multi-layered tales, please hit the like button to support the channel and subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming chapters. Wishing you a truly peaceful night where everything is still in the gentlest way, and may there always be a spark of warm light somewhere waiting for you to find it.